Ramada's sister is coming to our divisions, and since we currently have 4 time-limited units to pull on, I'm sure you guys have tons of Viz left over to pull for her. So we'll take a look at her kit, where she's best at, and whether she's a good unit to pull for you, depending on which playstyle you like the most. So let's dig into it. Moore is a Kodinama wielder, so she's a mace user. She has sub-jobs Red Mage and Cleric, so lots of utility in there. But overall, I think what she excels at is being a magic duelist. She has a very high spirit for a damage dealer, which is pretty impressive. She's got decent range in AoE, magic reflex, so she's pretty hard to kill from a magic sources. But she's pretty weak to physical attacks, so you have to pick your targets if you want to use her. And then she can also enable water teams because she has a AoE ability that decreases water resistance. So these are pretty cool. Then her TMR might actually be a reason to go for her altogether. It's a necklace, which everybody can use. It has some spirit in it, but mainly it has an ability that increases spirit by 15 in an AoE while giving you immunity to a couple status effects, including Berserk. If you want to fight Kingmon, the Berserk immunity part will be good, and then just increasing your spirit is really strong. You've probably seen me use Rain's TMR quite often. This is a little bit weaker in terms of spirit gain, but it's easier to use because you don't necessarily need to have somebody who can use clothing in order to be able to use that. So there are cases where this TMR will be the best in my opinion. Now, Moore's stats are competitive with most top tier mages in the game right now. She's got a little bit less HP than Black Witch Helena and Luelle, but a little bit more magic, and then the same agility as Black Witch Helena. That's really good, it's pretty fast. Okay dex, okay luck. Overall, she's in the same ballpark area. She does have some really good resistances for a caster though. She has immunity to silence and disable, which will be very relevant. And then some okay resistance to fire, which will be good, and to magic. And in her case, since she wants to fight other mages, that's pretty strong. Now, in today's world, blossoms are very scarce, and I'm always looking for ways to save on them. So would Moore be viable at level 115? Well, mainly she loses out on about 60 points of magic, which is a big deal, but it's not terrible when your characters can reach over 1000 when they go into a fight. So looking at this, I think she can be viable at 115. But when we look at her abilities, her 120 ability is really strong, so I would still take a good look at things, because if I were to pull for her, I would take her all the way to 120. So, looking at her passives, there are 2 passives that I think really make the character. First of all, she gains the ability to increase her spirit, HP, and fire resistance. Here's a really good 18 spirit buff. Then she's got another passive that increases her spirit by 15. I think you see the trend. That is how she survives fights with other magic users. If you are going to bring her against other types of characters, you could potentially go for the magic up so that she does more damage and tries to be a nuker more than a duelist. But overall, that high spirit on a damage dealer is, well, she's the first character that has that, which makes her unique, and I think that's the whole reason you would go for her. So I would probably have those passives equipped basically all the time. Then in terms of counters, if you're going to fight hybrid teams, you might want to go for the guard ability that decreases damage taken by 30% because that affects both physical and magical. But in 90% of the setups, since we would want her to fight mages, why not use the magic reflex? It's a 20% chance to outright negate magic attacks, and that will work against anything Black Witch Helena has in her kit, so it's pretty important. Finally, her limit burst is pretty cool. Most abilities in Moore's kits have cast times, so having an instant cast large AoE ability that deals large damage is pretty good, but that also decreases water resistance. This is one of the limit breaks you want to level all the way to 20, because you have 2 things that scale, the damage and the water resist decrease. If you're pairing her with other water characters, you definitely want this max, but it also enables her own damage in following turns, so I think it's worth leveling. Now, Kodinama Wielder as a main job is awesome. I won't read all of this. I'm sure you guys can just go on War of the Vision Calc and read it yourself, but guaranteed hit single target ability, increased jump and movement for 3 turns, which I'm sure you see Yuna use all the time. She's got a magic barrier, which in her EX job also gives her shell and regen. This is pretty good because regen means she has to heal herself a bit less often, and shell will stack with whatever other resistances she has to magic attacks, so it's really good to make her even tankier against other attacks. Then she's got an AoE attack, the ability to give herself a little bit of spirit penetration and increase magic attack around her, and finally a AoE attack that is instant cast, and it's her level 120 ability. So if she's not at 120, her only instant casts are going to be in her sub jobs. But this one isn't her main job and she can use it twice, so it's pretty good. On top of dealing large damage, it also decreases magic and has a chance of inflicting silence. That really goes well with her magic duelist archetype. Then if you're using the Kodonama Wielder's sub-job, I think you might want to use this just because it gives you the move and attack ability, which also is an instant cast, so it's another one that she brings to her kit. You also have an instant cast with a chance of stunning, but it has such a short range that I don't feel it's as relevant as the step and damage ability. I think the sub-job you will want to run more often than not on Moore is Red Mage, and the main reason for that is Jamming Thrust. This deals large damage at a very long range and cancels ability activation. Since Moore is very fast, as we've seen she has as much agility as Black Witch Helena, she will likely play while other enemies are casting, and you can leverage that to make sure she stops them. Now the AI might not do that very well, but on manual setup this is a really good ability. Otherwise, Cleric Subjob has some niche uses where it will be the best thing. If you're fighting enemies with water resistance, she gains access to a light attack, which is pretty cool. It also allows her to chain or cap chains from other light characters, which is a fun niche use for her. She can increase resistances to light and dark, which is fun, not necessarily useful all the time, but against Black Witch Helena that can be handy. And then she can negate status effects before they are cast, which includes Frostbite. And when we get Curie, who's going to use a barrage with an AoE Frostbite, I'm pretty sure people will start bringing clerics into their teams. So a couple uses, but more often than not, Red Mage would be the way to go in my opinion. So now that we've seen her kits, there are 2 ways that I would use her, and probably a mix of both. First off, Magic Duelist. You want to get her spirit as high as you can, give her Magic Reflex, make sure she uses her barrier, then potentially use Jamming Thrust, her silencing ability that also decreases magic, and just make sure enemy magic-based characters just have a bad time in front of her. She is not a tank though. Even though she herself can have really good spirit, she does not generate hate, which means the rest of your team might die around you, especially since we have somebody like Black Witch Helena in the meta that just hits in huge AoEs, and they're going to hit more and the rest of your team together. I like her though because often I see my damage dealers like Luel sit right next to my tank and they just die together to AoE attacks. Moore can take hits just as well as your magic tank probably. So thanks to that she can sit next to them and not die when Black Witch Helena drops the Teneral Rose ability, for example. And then we can build her with top tier fire resistance, which also allows her to counter King Mont pretty well. One thing I did not mention is her basic attack scales of her magic, so even if she's basic attacking King Mont, she can deal some decent damage to those characters. So getting berserked is a huge deal, of course, but at least she has some utility even when she's berserked. Now let's look at the Magic Duelist build. With this, she has about almost 6,000 HP, 1,000 magic. I'm not factoring in any vision card from teammates, so she could have better stats across the board if you're using Ramu, for example, or other stat-increasing vision cards. But overall, with this, she has 72 spirit before any buff. If somebody uses Rain's TMR on her, she goes to 97, which is insane, and she's going to be basically ignoring magic attacks unless the enemies have some spirit penetration. I just did a video on several types of ways to survive magic damage, so if you want to know who has some spirit penetration, go watch that. I'll put the link in the description below. But in this setup, she will be really hard to kill by most magic carries in the game. That includes Black Witch Helena, Yuna, and that includes opposite Moore. Yes, she has a buff that gives her 20 spirit penetration, but that won't really do much when you're faced with that much spirit. she would be a really good partner for another magic tank, somebody like Rain and whatnot, because as I mentioned previously, she can sit next to them and not die to AoE attacks while she retaliates with pretty good damage. Tidus, natural partner because she decreases water resistance, so there are natural synergies here. I will say one thing though. Moore does survive pretty well against Black Witch Helena, but I'm not sure she can kill Black Witch Helena easily, and that's because Black Witch has really good magic resistance, especially if she's as a Spellblade and uses the magic resist buff, and all of Moore's damage is magic type. So it is quite possible for the two of them to hit themselves for very low damage back and forth. In that case, Moore can hold out in front of Black Witch, but not kill her necessarily. So you have to watch what kind of build the enemy has. And one way to counter that, though, is to use Garvel's TMR if you have it. Fury Surge will give her 50% magic resistance penetration for 3 turns, and with that, she can successfully kill an enemy Black Witch. So you have to keep that in mind and potentially swap your build depending on how she's built. Now, let's talk about the Fire Hunter build, which I think is hilarious. We trade out a little bit of Spirit in favor of a lot of fire resistance with this build. So she goes into a fight with about the same amount of HP, a little bit less magic, a little bit less Spirit, we're only at 67, but that's still really high. And then 77 fire resist, which is insane. With that, she doesn't really care about an enemy fire team. She can pretty much ignore their damage for the entire fight. Natural good partners will be Ramada, who can increase her own magic resistance, dispel buffs on the enemy team, remove hate from enemy tanks possibly, Tidus again, and an allied Kingmont would do really well because he has an ability that increases all element resistances around him, thus throwing your fire resistance even higher. It's obviously going to be strong against Kingmont because he has fire damage only, and then you could potentially replace the in the TMR slot, replace Rain's clothing with her own necklace, so she also gives Berserk immunity for a couple turn, ignoring the risk of the limit break from the enemy Kingmont. Rain is also going to be very weak against Moore in this build, and any magic user, again, that does not have Spirit Penetration will still struggle with killing her. So I think that would be a very fun build to use. You do need the Water Ring, though, which not everybody has because it's a tower reward. So for PvE, I think she's good, but I'll only give her 8 out of 10 because there are units like Black Witch Helena that can just blow up the entire map, and while Moore is good, she doesn't do that just as well. And she also doesn't take physical attacks as well as Black Witch Helena does with her barriers and whatnot, so you still have to be wary of how you're using her. In Arena, when you can pick your fights, she is incredible. She does well against Black Witch, like I said, and Kingmont, who are going to stay in the meta for a very long time. So until we see Cloud's release and a bunch of very powerful physical attackers coming back to the meta, I think she'll do fairly well, especially if you can place her in front of the enemy Black Witch and just have them clash together. And then if there's an enemy physical attacker, you try to put Moore as far away as you can from him. In a blind mode though, like Guild Wars, where you don't pick where your opponent starts and where Moore starts, she won't do as well. I think she might end up in front of a Gilgamesh and just get destroyed by him or other physical attackers like Dwayne. So I don't think she'll fare as well in those game modes. And then for live PvP, she might do a little bit better. I really love the Kododama job in general, can increase mobility, lots of damage, some instant casts, some slower abilities, which allows you to precast in some areas. So there is a lot of potential in her kit. But there is one thing I dislike, and it's the fact that she doesn't really have AoE buffs. She's mainly a selfish character, and the only real utility she has is either in her cleric subjob or in her ability to increase magic attack for her allies, which is good, but not with every kind of teammate, so she's mainly a selfish character. For this reason, not so sure how well she'll perform in live PvP. I guess we'll have to see. With all that said, should you pull for her? Well, I don't think so. She's a permanent pool character. We just got out of a bunch of time-limited units. We will get some more time-limited units in the form of Final Fantasy 7 collaboration fairly soon, so I think you should save. She will be there in the pool forever. You don't need her immediately, but depending on the banners, if there is some really good banners in which she's guaranteed, like Luel had, I might say go for it. So, depends what you like overall, but do keep in mind that we have a lot of reasons to spend Viz that are coming up, so you better be safe than spend too much. So that was it, guys. Thank you for watching. I would like to ask, how do you like the idea of evaluating by game type at the end? I did not want to take too long talking about this because I'm trying to keep these videos fairly short, but if there's a lot of people that would like to have a deeper analysis on that topic, I can definitely do that. So thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.